Hey everybody, Leslie Roberts out in the garage getting my 1970 CZ side piper all in shape for this year's CZ World Championships at the end of April. Now, may not look like much. Got the frame powder coated. My buddy Doug McLean is here each week helping me carve out some of the parts and making sure that this is going to be a top race bike. Now, the event is coming in 3 months. So folks, get out in the garage and do the same. Get your bikes and body ready because this is going to be an epic event. I promise that. We've got some real surprises, some nice changes this year. Remember, this is a 2-day racing format this year. Saturday, the Robin Hanna Cup is going to be devoted to post-vintage bikes, some of the adult minis, and then, of course, all the way up to modern support bikes. Yes, you're going to have a place to ride your motorcycle at our event this year. Sunday, of course, it's near and dear to my heart. That's when the CZs get out on the track and all the mixed brand vintage bikes that we also invite to the event. Going to be epic, going to be fun, going to be competitive. We're going to have a few nice features this year that we haven't had in the past. One of them is called the Twinport Challenge. In fact, we're going to be speaking about that in a few minutes to my dear friend and fellow committee member on the original CZ World Championships Committee, Rick Nabers, who is, as many of you know, one of the foremost authorities in the world on CZ motorcycles. So I'm going to be picking his brain in a few minutes. And if you've got about a half hour, sit back, pour yourself a cup of coffee, and check in with Rick and I as we discuss his history as the originator of the CZ World Championships, where it went, some of its features, and where it's going right now, including the Twinport Challenge, which Rick is going to speak about. So, like I say, get a cup of coffee, sit back, and take a few breaths as you dive in with Rick Nabers and myself.
Hey everybody, I'm here this afternoon with my friend and fellow original CZ World Championship Committee member, and one of the most influential vintage motocross men still alive and building bikes today, Rick Nabers. Now, I hope you don't mind, Rick, if I blow a little smoke your way, but you are, if you're not one of, you are certainly one of the foremost authorities on vintage CZs and Greaves motorcycles anywhere in the world. But of interest to us today is the fact that you are the originator and the ground floor operator, if I may, for the very first of many CZ World Championships beginning back in the 1980s. Rick, it is my pleasure to have you with us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
I am glad you're here, too. We have a lot of things to get into. I want to talk about the upcoming Twinport Challenge, which is happening at this year's original CZ World Championships. But first, let's take a step back and let's talk about that original CZ World Championship that took off in, I believe, 1980. Now, how did that happen? Well, where did you get the idea, and what inspired you to pursue that in the first place?
Well, actually what happened was there were several of us at Saddleback Park racing one afternoon, and I was with Pete Molly and Jody Weissel from Motocross Action Magazine, and Dennis Cox, the photographer, and a bunch of us were sitting around and discussing how bikes had changed. And in 1980, they had, the suspension travel had doubled and tripled over what a CZ was just 5 years earlier. So, and we had a bunch of guys, talk. There were so many old CZs out that when we saw a CZ kind of running through the pits, and in 1980 there were a lot of them still going to Saddleback Park every Saturday afternoon and wanting to race, and they were being laughed at. So it kind of started out as a joke that we would have a CZ day, a CZ race. And Pete Molly was all for, because he still had a big inventory of parts and quite a few things left over from his shop. And so, we all kind of got excited about it. And then Jody Weissel with Motocross Action Magazine really made it take off. He put out made the first flyers, and Dennis Cox and I went around and put them in motorcycle shops, and the word of mouth. And then we had like 65 guys show up at that first race in I believe it was October of 1980, and it was a lot of fun. And we thought it was just going to be a one-day deal. Do you remember who actually won
the race that day?
Yes, Art McLean. Art McLean won the open class, and Jerry Bramman won the 250 class.
Okay.
The very next year in '81, Clark Jones won the open, and Gary Jones won the 250. So, I mean,
now hold on a second. So you went after the race. It went from being a joke to something you took seriously.
Right.
What prompted you to run another race? Was it the turnout or the enthusiasm?
No, the enthusiasm. And after that race, we all started. Jody Weissel at the magazine, and I did, and Pete did. Pete Molly also got them. We got tons of phone calls. When's the next CZ day gonna be? You know, so it just all of a sudden we did it once, and then it just immediately took off like a rocket ship. And the next year there was like 75. It grew, 25 guys more the second year, and we added the bike show, and really made a big deal out of it. The pictures from the first year that were in Cycle News and also in Motocross Action, really sold it. They sold and everybody, and there were thousands of old CZs laying around in people's garages that they wanted to get rid of or run them. And so there was no shortage of bikes and no shortage of riders. So it just automatically took off.
And because it did take off. When I first heard about it, it was a little bit later in the 80s, and it was already really a growing and going enterprise. Now you directed the race for how many years?
Well, I was involved the first 3 years. 3 years, I was kind of an apprentice. Jody Weissel and Pete, and then Jim Beltnick from SMX Saddleback Motocross took me under their wing, and they said, "Well, you're going to run this thing, to keep it going, but they taught me how to run a race." I was just an average, middle or pretty good intermediate at that time, but I loved CZs, and so I was picked, and that's how it started. So basically, I ran it by myself or with Jim Beltnick as the promoter for 7 years, and I was on the staff for the first 3. So 10 years under with me on board running the show.
Before I get into more of the history, let's of the race. Let's back up a little bit. I want to know about your involvement in CZs. Were you exposed to them as a kid? Did your old man ride CZs? How did you get involved?
Well, CZs were, I was just reading Motocross Action, the magazines. I was a surfer kid growing up in Corona Del Mar. I had horses on the beach at the old stables in between Corona Del Mar and which is now the Crystal Cove State Park. There used to be a stables there. Well, friends of mine had CZs, and they would ride them. The cops before helicopters would chase them, and I thought, man, that looks like a lot of fun. I'm gonna get a bike. Well, I ended up my first CZ. I still have it. It's sitting here in my office. Was a 1968 250 Twin Piper. I still own the bike. I got it from Kubitschek, and it was, just something that that grew. I just grew right into motorcycles. And the story is the Irvine Ranch, which is right off of where Coast Highway is, where Cameo Shores, as you're driving down, would be right behind where Javier's restaurant is in Crystal Cove, up on the hillside there. There's still all those open hills. We would ride across all those hills. We could ride all the way to Dana Point and back, through the Irvine Ranch. And they couldn't catch you. They didn't have helicopters. They had, but they could not go the way we could go, and we could go down canyons and all kinds of things. And we had a blast, and then sometimes we just run them right down Coast Highway home. And, Newport Beach Police, would never say anything to us. So it was a lot of fun. That's how I got started in riding.
Well, when did you shift from being a rider into being a bike builder?
Okay, well, this happened right around 1972 or so, or 71, 72. I started going to Saddleback Park, and I had an El Camino, and I'd put my CZ in the back of the El Camino and go up to Saddleback Park. And then I got hooked on motocross just by sitting there watching the first few big races, like the Trans Am, the Trans AMA that was up there.
Sure.
The Inter Am also, and stuff like that. So we went up there, and we started going to Saddleback and racing, just entering the local races, joined CMC and started racing. And that's how it's. Then normally we quit trail riding over the hills. That was too much hassle. After a while, it was just easier to go to Saddleback. So that's how I got into that. And bike building, we had my parents were rebuilding a house in Newport Beach, and we leased a 1,500 square foot warehouse up off of Logan Street in Costa Mesa. Well, they finished redoing their house. They stored furniture in that, and then instead of turning it back in, I kept it and put motorcycles in it and started my own shop in that space. And that's when I started building bikes and building race bikes, and just working and race prepping. All my friends brought their bikes down and kept them in that shop. And we just kind of used it as a center of operations. And then from there, when the CZ World Championship started in 1980, then we started getting old CZs and that had been sitting around and fixing them up. That's how the thing started.
Okay. Well, let's fast forward a bit, because I know that after you passed the race on to several other people, and it moved through the hands of several guys until I think it was here, 2013, 2014, when Robin Hanna reached out and contacted you and asked you if he could revive the race. Am I right about that?
Yeah. Well, what happened? I ran the race till 1980. Then Ron Aldrich had it for 4 or 5 years. Then it went to Lee Holt. CZ guy Lee Holt had it. Charlie Richardson ran it for a while.
Right.
Dave Boydston had it for a while. And then it kind of went dormant for a few years. And then Robin Hanna, as you've said, called me in 2014, and he said, "Rick, what do you think about restarting the race?" And I go, "That's my dream. Go for it, man. You've got." And then, so Robin and I started meeting at some of the ARMA events and started talking about it. And then he would call me all the time. And as he did, I said, "Robin, you're going to run them in Northern California." I said, "Get yourself a good group of friends and start calling around and getting their input, as to what you need to do." And that's how it started up. And I didn't go to the 2014 race, the very first one. Something was up. I was sick or something. But 2015, I was there with my family, and Jim Keaton and I, that's the last time I raced, was in 2015. Jim Keaton and I both raced Twinports in that event.
Well, let's go to that. Let's talk about the Twinports now, because in a few months we've got our the 2020 Original CZ World Championships coming at MMX Racing in Marysville, and we've got 2 days of racing. Sunday, of course, will be our vintage program devoted to CZs and mixed brands and a couple specialty races, which I'm going to get to. And then, of course, on Saturday is the Robin Hanna Cup with all the post-vintage activity. But I want to really narrow down and talk about that Twinport challenge that you've come up with. You're going to be putting on the track on Sunday Twinport CZs 250s and 360s and competing against each other strictly. Is that what I understand?
Yes. Well, we're going to run.
Who this race is all about right here is runner-up, and where's Windsor? Mike Whipper. They're just all going crazy here. All right, we're looking for Windsor. Okay, you better be doing the 100-yard dash. Is this him right here?
Same gate, and 250 Twinports, 360s, and the scorekeepers can just write the numbers down. We can figure it out real easy. Who's the first 360 and who's the first 250 is pretty simple. We're not going to run any expert, intermediate, or beginner in that because there's just not enough bikes. Okay. And it's winner take all, and in the 250, winner take all in the 360, and put them out there. Now, we don't expect guys to bring a $20,000. That's what they're worth now. They're worth 360 just sold at the auction 2 days ago. Yep. For $16,500. We don't expect guys to bring them out there and beat them up. We know the value of these bikes, but we're just going to put them on the track. You can go as fast or as slow as you want with them, But it's just kind of a thing that we have to do to celebrate probably the most famous CZ of them all. And if you ask like Jim Stein, who was our first American factory-sponsored rider in Europe, about the Twinport CZ, he'll tell you it's the best handling bike that CZ ever built. It's just the way the frame is, the geometry, where the center of gravity is on it. They handle better than anything. The Side Piper was pretty close, but the Twinport was the best. And this is the bike that really ended four-stroke domination in the World Championship Series.
Rick, the interesting thing to me is the fact that very, very few Twinports were imported into the United States, right? Right.
There was only 750, by Bertus's calculations, 360s built in total production for the entire world. So you could take that and probably got maybe 200 of them 200, possibly 300 came to the United States. The rest were spread out in Europe and were factory race bikes. They didn't have factory bikes then. What they did is they just went over and took one off the assembly line and gave it to the factory mechanics, who then put it together and started to do their thing and prep them for the professional riders. And the 250s, there was 2,200 of those built. A little over 2,200 of the 250s.
For such a small production run, I'm amazed at the impact that those Twinports had. Because like you say, that was the really first commercial bike available which challenged the big thumpers. And look where the development has gone since then. It's really stunning. And you will have no idea how many folks are going to be showing with their Twinports this year, right?
No, I really don't. See, it's going to be the whole Twinport Day portion of this thing is spread between the bike show, where I've gotten commitments from a lot of Twinport owners to bring bikes at least to show. I'm going to make these guys, at least start them up and take a look, throw on their, vintage riding gear and, line up on the starting line, take off at the gate. If you don't want to run the whole moto, pull off the track, but at least start. So we have all the bikes on the track, and we can have the pictures, and, we want to try to have something that the Europeans will be jealous of, in a sense, because our bike shows that we've had have been huge in previous years, and it amazes those guys how many CZs, are brought to our event every year.
Yeah,
it's phenomenal.
It is phenomenal, and I've been coming to the event since the second one, when I actually first met Robin, and I was amazed then at the amount of beautiful builds. But every year we're seeing more and more CZs coming out of the woodworks. And brother, let's talk about that bike show for a moment. How is that done? Do you line them up by virtue of their year or their displacement? How does the bike show operate?
Well, we do it on the track right in front of the starting gate because we can take our time right in that little area on the straightaway in front of the start, because when practice starts, that's not part of the practice track. They can enter. We just have the guys enter over by where the exit is. There's room over there. And we can set up all of the bikes on the track. We start with a Twinport row on the first row closest to the starting gate. Then we go to the side pipers in the next row. Then we go to the 72, the yellow tank toaster tank bike. Now, if there isn't enough of those bikes there, then we combine the first coffin tank bikes with them, the red and the blue black frame coffin tanks with the toaster tanks. So the 72, 73, 74 bikes can be together. Then we put the red frames behind that row. The red frames include 74 and 75 defaulters. We put all of those in like one row. Then behind that,
go ahead.
Then behind that, we put. Well, I guess we're not going to do that. Rethinking that, we're going to just sprinkle the long travel bikes, all throughout wherever in the year that they represent. We'll put it that way.
What about a guy, Rick, that it does not have a show bike? He's got he's never restored his bike. It's a little bit ratty. He rides it occasionally. Can he bring that bike and put it in the show?
Yeah, he might win a trophy with it. We want bikes in original 1973 racing form. I mean, also if he takes a hose and just wipes it off, but it's got the original tank on it. It's not restored. Or, the original number plates and metal number plates and the paint's half peeling off. As long as he can put a number on it, or whatever, just, and the tires will hold air, or not, or maybe not even that. Just push it up there and put it on in the show.
Okay.
At Hangtown, 2 years ago at in 2017 at Prairie City, there was a guy. The guy who won the most original bike had a 1969 250 side piper that was an absolute barn find. It had 30 years worth of dust all over it. and oil had leaked from it and everything else. There was no air in the tire, but it was all original. It had Barham tires front and rear, and he took home the trophy.
There you go.
For the most original bike.
That's great. So you don't have to have a pristine show bike to enter it in the bike show, is what I'm asking.
We want.
That's great.
What Robin did in 2015, and I urged, he and I had talked about this, is you take every CZ, everybody who's going to enter the race and show bike, and put them all up there in the lines. And Doug comes along with it. He's got a chalker, and he draws a straight chalk line, and we line up the front wheels on the chalk, going all the way across, and in like 10-foot blocks, so that all the front wheels. And so when you stand on the end of the row, all the handlebars, you look right down, and it's a fabulous look when you see 25 CZs on the front row or the second row, and they're all lined up perfect. And it doesn't matter what condition the bike is in. It's there. It's a CZ, and we love them in any condition.
Okay. Now, it is a bike show, and there will be judging. Now, are you doing the judging yourself? Do you have any celebrity judges coming on board this year?
Yes. Well, Burtis has been ill, very ill the last few months, and there's a little question as to whether he can make it. But Jim Stein and Dave Boydston will be joining me as the judges of the bikes. Jim Stein's going to be the first American rider. He knows these bikes backwards and forwards. And Dave Boydston, who is the top CZ restorer anywhere right now. I mean, he just had a whole bunch of CZs go through the Las Vegas auction, and they were pristine and absolutely 100% correct. He's going to be joining me, and so the three of us, we can walk down and we can judge. But Dave Boydston helped me with the bike show last year, and he did a fantastic job with this. And everybody was happy with the trophies, and there will be trophies. Last year we did coffee mugs, or last 2 years we did coffee mugs. We're going to look into suggestions for something a little different this year, but it's a lot of fun doing a bike show. The one thing is we may serve some coffee up there, make it a coffee and cars type of event where you come up and get a cup of coffee and wander through and look at all the bikes. And last year we had the Czechs over here with us, Falta and Bavarowski, and all these guys were walking around signing gas tanks, and it was really it's a great part of the event. It's the best part of the social event of the weekend when you're walking the bike show.
Yeah, and it's super popular. We get a lot of inquiries and people commenting afterward. Now that bike show is going to be running. From what I understand this year, we're going to try to get it in about 9 o'clock on Saturday morning because we've got racing in the afternoon. So that'll give everybody a couple good hours to get their bikes out there, get judged, and look and see what everybody else has brought. Rick, this as far as I'm concerned, we're taking a risk this year. We're splitting it into 2 days, and we really don't know how many folks are going to show up and what they're going to bring. But I really feel, with all the preparation that you and I have been doing over the last few years, we're trying to keep to the model that Rob and Hannah set for us, and I think we're on it, and I think we're doing a good job. But I swear to you, I really think that this year is going to be the year we break through and we get people from – I mean, we've been getting them from international parts. All of last year, 30 international riders. That's amazing. But I think this is the year we break through, and the folks really see that we have something fabulous going on up here in Northern California. This is the only vintage track in Northern California. This is the track, Rick, that Danny Magoo Chandler grew up on. Brad Lackey, Danny Laporte, Danny Turner, Catalupi. This was a pretty iconic location. The word is getting out, and I like I say, I really feel this year we're going to top all the previous efforts. We're streamlining a lot of things. We're making sure that we listen to the complaints and criticisms and comments from the people who are participating. And, man, I just think we got something really good going. Care to add on that at all?
No, I think you've described it absolutely perfectly. That this race is really, really important to vintage motocross. That it continues and that it grows. And it's like the comments that I'm getting from friends in Europe that have attended is they've never seen so many good-natured, friendly people all in one location. I mean, it's just, people just live to get back to Marysville for next year, and it's just, it's exciting.
It's
very exciting.
Well, brother, in your capable hands, and me doing what I can and the committee busting butt, we are going to do everything we can to make sure that this event and the ones following are excellent and meet and surpass everybody's expectation, because as far as I'm concerned, this is a labor of love. You and I aren't making a nickel on this. We put a lot of money of our own into it. We're not about a super commercial operation because, as you said, this is an annual family reunion of the old vintage community getting together from all over the world to celebrate once again our bikes and our love for riding. Rick Nabers, I want to thank you very much for spending the time with me this afternoon and for explaining and describing your history, the history of the Twinport, and what's going to happen at the race this year. Folks, get your bikes ready. Head over to czriders.com for all the information, including the classes that are going to be available. And if you have any questions at all, reach out to any of the committee members. You can contact us on Facebook or through czriders.com. Any questions at all, Rick, myself, Winthrop Hires, there's a ton of guys that will help you. And in the meantime, get ready because this is going to be the original CZ World Championships. It's going to be a good. Rick, thank you very much, man, and I hope to see you in a couple months, all right?
Okay, we'll see you soon, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, you will. All right.
Okay.
Rick Nabers, everybody.
Okay.